Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Desperate Pursuit. We have Carson here again with us. Anything new, Carson, since the last time?
Oh, a lot. A lot that's going to tie into this podcast specifically.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought you had I know what you're talking about, and so I thought you had a bunch more to say, but no, I'm connected now.
I'll save it for the podcast.
Which is on physical ailment. We're doing physical ailment as far as spiritual attacks.
Mm-hmm.
I think up till now we've done a lot of mental warfare or more so principle, not so much mental warfare, but principle concept type things, disunity, fear, that type of stuff. Fear is mental, but it's also fear is sometimes instinctual, and so it becomes more principle than anything.
Mm-hmm.
This time around, more tangible is the physical ailment side of things.
Yes.
So we'll start in Matthew chapter 9, because there's different ways that physical ailment occurs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Matthew chapter 9 just has a good summation of it.
Yeah.
Again, there are other examples outside of this that do also play into physical ailment, sickness being one of them. But this one is pretty solid.
Yeah.
Starting in 32, Jesus has just healed, if I'm not mistaken, 2 blind men. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 32, it says, while they were going out, a man who was demon-possessed could not talk was brought to Jesus. And when the demon was driven out, the man who had been mute spoke. The crowd was amazed and said, nothing like this has ever been seen in Israel. And then the Pharisees are upset about it, as per usual. The reason that this is a good summation is one, demon possession. Right? Demon possession, I've heard, and I've studied on just to make sure it was the case, but if you're saved, you're not going to be demon possessed. If you have the Spirit of Christ, you're not going to be demon possessed.
Yeah.
That said, not everybody has accepted the Spirit of Christ, and so some people do become demon possessed.
Yes.
And then a step further, right, because he was demon possessed, the demon was actually keeping him from speaking, which made him mute.
Mm-hmm.
So it's this direct correlation of what's making him mute is the spirit of the demon that's possessed him.
Yeah.
So from this, we know for a fact that the enemy uses physical ailment, in this case disability, specifically being mute, to attack this one person who is coming to Jesus. He was brought to Jesus. Either way, his soul is coming to Jesus, whether someone's taking him or he's coming to Jesus.
Yeah.
He is supposed to be in the presence of Jesus. The demon is trying to keep that from happening by making him physically ailed, so that he can't ask Jesus for healing because he's mute.
Yeah.
And Jesus kind of sees past that.
Yes. What I always find crazy is just how deceived the Pharisees are, and how and my Bible says he cast out demons by the prince of demons. And just thinking of that logic, it makes no sense, because how can evil drive out evil? But that's one thing that always sticks out to me, just how blind they were during that time. But yeah, I think a lot of times they try to get in the way, especially the devil. He really tries to get in the way of us pursuing a relationship with God. And the devil's kind of a pick-me, and he loves attention. So he wants to get our attention as much as he possibly can, so that we're not focusing on God, not pursuing a relationship, not in our word, not praying to him. And well, he definitely tried that against me last week. So to give context, I was feeling high and mighty, and I had some conviction going on. I was dealing with some guilt and shame because of sin, and I kind of sat back and I was like, why am I feeling guilty and shame? This is literally a tactic the devil was trying to do to attack me. So I was like, you know what? So I was in prayer, and during my prayer, I just got this sense of conviction, and I started going at the devil. I was rebuking him aggressively and essentially poking the bear a little bit too much. So I rebuked him, cast him out of my life in Jesus' name, and I felt great. So I ended up waking up the next morning feeling like I got ran over by a train with a fever, and it was down bad. And I was like, okay, that can't be a coincidence. The night that I cast out the devil in the most aggressive way, talking all types of smack to him, I'm going to, of course, feel bad the next day. So I definitely do feel as though that was a spiritual attack from the enemy, especially since I went to the doctor and they were like, we don't know what you have, to be honest. They're like, you have some type of illness that we can't test for. And I was like, wow, that helps so much. So, and all of that leading up, I definitely do feel as though it was a spiritual attack that essentially I kind of provoked, but the devil was using as a way to get me so focused on him, focused on my physical illness, focusing on the pain that I was experiencing rather than pursuing a relationship with God. And leading up to that week, I kind of put two and two together recently. That was week 7 of freedom, which was a week when I went through freedom that was very like hard hitting for me, and that released me from a lot of, past traumas, a lot of pain that I had experienced, and that freed me from a lot of pride that I was experiencing. So I definitely do think the timing of it wasn't coincidental as well, trying to prevent me from being able to go through that week 7 again. I think the devil definitely used that physical attack on me as a way to keep me from God, keep me from being in my word, keep me from worshiping, praising, and just praying to him by being so wrapped up in my illness.
Yeah, I will say too, like whenever I'm sick, it is a minor change too. It's not something like super deep or spiritual. I mean, it is spiritual, but it's not super deep. Is like before knowing God, when I got sick, I'd be super over dramatic and I'd be like, I'm ready to go. Like, this is how I die. I mean, it sucks, but like, you know what? I'd rather be dead than have to deal with this migraine.
Yeah.
Migraines actually take me out. I'm not a fan of migraines. But that's how I thought before. And now I'll get sick and my mind starts to go that direction. Like, I don't get to the point where I'm like, I'm ready to go. But my mind starts to go that direction where it's like, I don't want to deal with. And then I'll remember like, oh, you know what? Like, Jesus is the great healer. Let me ask for some healing. And I'll start asking for healing, and I'll remember, oh wait, like this could be a spiritual attack as well, where the enemy's trying to throw like some physical ailment at it. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're throwing this physical ailment at me. I got God like on my side. Yeah. He's gonna heal me. Watch this. Mm-hmm. And then I'll like pray for literally a whole day straight. Like as long as I'm feeling fever or like the slightest bit of a migraine, I'm just like constantly like, God, you can heal this. I know you can do it. No. Heal it in your name. And then like a day and a half later, it's gone.
Yeah. That's actually funny you said that, because the first day, like I was down bad. I was like, oh gosh. I felt like Job, I think it's in Job 3. So when he's like lamenting his birth, he was like saying, why am I alive? That's kind of how I felt. And then I was like, well, the doctors don't know what I have. And I'm like, Jesus is the great healer. So I started praying to Jesus and I started to feel a little bit better. And in my prayer, I had been struggling with getting in my word one-on-one, and just the busyness of life happened. And during my prayer, God kind of revealed to me, like, you may be feeling this illness now, but I'm giving you a week's worth of rest to now have time to get in your word one-on-one with me, which is something that you've been struggling to do. So in a sense, yeah, I did struggle with an illness that was a spiritual attack by the devil, but God worked it and turned it into something good by allowing me to now have the time that I was searching for to get in my word one-on-one with him. So I definitely do think not only do we experience physical ailments in the form of spiritual warfare from the enemy, but obviously we know God can heal us from those as he did to me, but he can also work, those seasons of suffering and those circumstances for good.
Yeah, we'll get into this a little later. Mm-hmm. But it's crazy how being sick like that, where you're like, oh man, I'm going to die from this. This is going to take me out. Yeah. And again, I am a little dramatic, so that's how sometimes I think, at least at the start. And it's crazy how much you'll reevaluate. Like even before knowing God, I would still reevaluate and be like, is this really how I'm going out? Now, right, knowing God, it's almost like this thing where God, and again, we'll go into it later because I think that's what speaks to a loving God, right? It is that he turns it for good. Yeah. And we'll go into that more later, but it's crazy how that will give you an opportunity to evaluate where you're at spiritually, fit like in all the realms. And you're like, oh, you know what? I've been in a place of comfort and this physical ailment that maybe the enemy meant for bad, God's using it to help me reevaluate where in my life I feel like, hey, if I were to go from this sickness, there's some things on the table that I've kind of left that I don't want to leave on the table. But also something that happened to me the past couple of days, not to me, but something that's been in my life that happened to somebody else, was my uncle. He just had a surgery, and I don't know what the exact thing they needed to do was. What I do know is that they had to stop his heart, and then resuscitate him, because that was just a procedure that needed to happen. He's had open heart surgeries before, and he's overcome. I don't know if they've all been like super minimal % chances, but I know that a few of them, maybe 2 or 3 at least, were like 2 to 5% chance that he would make it through the surgery. So to make it through like several is like, okay, those odds are kind of insane.
Wow.
I think at one point too, he had literally died for like a couple of minutes, and then he got brought back to life. So it's always scary if he has to go into a surgery like that, because it's like, man, he's got to go into another one. There's another chance. Like, we're chancing it again.
Major surgery,
Yeah. And this time around, in the past, when he had his surgeries, I would always pray, hey, God, he's got kids, and, I know he's talked about some of the things he's done. Please be faithful to allow his kids to grow up, to see his kids grow up, and to kind of be there for them where he fell short. And also because I know that, there are things that weigh on him that maybe he feels like the way he's making up for it is to help his kids not go through the same things. Be faithful to be faithful to him, allow him to watch his kids grow up. Right, pull him through. Until yesterday, he hadn't gone through the surgery yet, but I still couldn't help but feel thankful that, even though there's a chance, we're chancing it again. You don't want to see anything bad happen. But even if something bad did happen, I'm thankful that he was faithful to my uncle. Because now all his kids are grown and they're taken care of. So God has definitely been faithful in that aspect. But also at the same time, like, that's physical ailment for sure. Is to have that heart condition. I don't know if it's attacks from the enemy per se, but I know that God's definitely used it for good. So
physical ailments definitely can be, to a degree, difficult to remain faithful in, especially people new to faith who are battling spiritual warfare for maybe the first time, and they're not quite like well versed in like, okay, this is an attack from the enemy. Like, this is the devil attacking me. And even non-believers, they're like, oh, I'm going to blame God for my circumstances. And that always takes me to Job 16:12. It says, I was at ease, and he broke me apart. He seized me by the neck and dashed me to pieces. He set me up as his target. And I think that kind of mindset plays into people new of faith and, non-believers that take, a loss of a family member or a loved one who died, or a close loved one having an illness that is that's kind of scary, like cancer, or they're experiencing a physical ailment like a disability or a freak accident, and they're like, oh, why me? Like, why did this happen to me? And they kind of blame God, for the circumstances. But a lot of times, we live in a broken world, and we don't realize that is a spiritual attack, from the enemy, and he's doing exactly what he wants us to do, and that's turn our eyes away from God, and to essentially blame him for our circumstances, so that we no longer are putting our faith in him, and now we're going about life blaming him and living on our own accord. But what we don't realize is we're actually living for the devil when we do that.
Yeah, and I think something that speaks to that too is Parker was on the podcast the other day, and he used the phrase "me monster," and he was like, not to be corny, or I forget what he said exactly. It was like corny or cliche or something. But he used the term "me monster," where everything's about me. And I think that's also another thing that physical ailment does, is it turns us into me monsters of like, I'm sick, I'm disabled, I'm, and it creates this victim mentality of like, well, I can't do this because I'm not in perfect condition. I'm mute, I'm blind, I'm deaf.
Mm-hmm.
You see so many people who have disabilities, who have overcome it, who are like they're more inspirational because they have the disability, as opposed to those same people saying, oh, well, I can't do this because I'm disabled. I can't do this because I'm sick. I can't. Becoming a victim, right? But instead they choose to be somebody who promotes not just life for themselves, but for others, of like, I can do this with what I have.
Yeah.
You have more than me. I promise you can do it too. And not in this way of condescending of like, well, how come you haven't done it?
Yeah.
It's more of like, if I can do it, hey, take heart.
Yeah.
You know, you could do it too.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people that do play into that victim mindset essentially identify themselves as their physical ailment or as their, and they're like, oh, well, I'm experiencing this. So like, this is me now. And my life has gotten harder. So now I can't do the things that I normally did. And they start to put themselves in a box because of their physical ailment. And then a lot of people that strive above that aren't necessarily defining themselves by their disability or ailment, but they're now saying, yes, this is a minor inconvenience, and yes, it's just another hoop that I have to jump over, but I'm going to get through it anyway. And in a sense, I feel like whether they're consciously doing it in faith, for God or not, I think it does point back to God blessing them with, the strength to overcome that obstacle.
Another example of just kind of physical ailment and this is a common one actually, but I'm still going to use it, is the woman with the issue of blood, right? The woman with the issue of blood, it says in verse 20, just then a woman who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak. She said to herself, if I only touch his cloak, I will be healed. Jesus turned and saw her. Take heart, daughter, he said. Your faith has healed you. And the woman was healed at that moment. Something that I am just going to kind of put a pin in is that Jesus says, take heart, daughter, your faith has healed you. And then I'm going to go quickly to chapter 8, verse 5. The faith of the centurion, that one's a common one too, but just kind of getting the important details here. And this is after the centurion says, you don't need to come to my home, right? I'm not worthy.
Yeah.
The centurion says, Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof, but just say the word and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes. I tell that one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard this, he was amazed and said to those following him, truly I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. I say to you that many will come from the east and the west and will take their places at the feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the subjects of the kingdom will be thrown outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then Jesus said to the centurion, go, let it be done just as you believed it would. And his servant was healed at that moment. The most important thing here, because spiritual warfare, right, it's important to keep context.
Yeah.
Spiritual warfare ultimately is a battle against principles and dark forces, powers, right?
Yeah.
So when dealing with spiritual warfare, what's important to remember is authority. Our authority always comes from Jesus, and so if the authority doesn't come from Jesus, well, then it's powerless, essentially.
Yeah.
There isn't another authority, right, that would have any use against essentially angels. There just isn't, right?
Yeah.
So all authority has to come from Jesus. The centurion saying, I know about authority because I'm a centurion.
Yeah.
So if you, and that's basically what he's saying is like, I understand what your authority is. It's authority over everything. If you say for it to be done, it'll be done. Like, you don't have to be in my house. You don't have to just say that it's done and it'll be done.
Yeah.
And Jesus is surprised because it's like nobody has faith to that level. And so it's not even Jesus saying, oh, no one understands it the way you understand it. It's saying no one has the same faith of all you have to do is say it. Like, and we see that a lot where people are trying to touch Jesus, be in proximity, all these things. based on their own understanding. And maybe that's kind of what helps the centurion with his faith, is his understanding. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah.
But I know for certain that his faith is at the level that what he's saying to Jesus is, I see your authority and I understand that you're the only authority.
Yeah.
Just say it and it'll be done. Like, everyone else is going to try to do this and that.
Yeah.
I'm not worthy for you to be in my house. Like, just say it.
Yeah. And I feel like since he was, a Roman soldier, I think since he never was really truly in close proximity with Jesus, and he wasn't like a disciple where he had a relationship, where he was, traveling with Jesus, where he was in just close relation with him, that also kind of gave him like the insight of, okay, like Jesus has been healing the blind, he's been healing the sick, he's been healing the mute, people who are paralyzed, like people who are demon possessed, like he's healing all these people. Like, there hasn't been one thing, like he's raised people from the dead, like there's not one thing he hasn't been able to do. And I think with him not having that close proximity, it also gave him that understanding of like, okay, Jesus can literally heal my servant with a blink of an eye. Like, he doesn't have to, go and do these things. And I think not having that close proximity with Jesus is what gave him that unique perspective and that faith in him to be able to heal that servant by not even stepping in the house, by just saying it's done and it being done.
You saying that too kind of gives me a light bulb, because the centurion is not like a disciple that's been in close proximity, that's seen it, that's seen Jesus put his hands on this person, that his understanding may be vague enough to where he doesn't even know really what Jesus is doing to heal these people.
Yeah.
He just knows it's being done. And so that maybe that lack of understanding of maybe that lack of proximity is creating a gap for him where he's not limiting Jesus to, oh, you've got to touch him.
Yeah.
Because he's not been in proximity to see that, to him, he's like, well, I don't know how you're doing it, but what I know is that all you have to do is just say it.
You can't do it, yeah.
So, that's interesting too. I think the second thing I was thinking about was it's according to their faith, right?
Yeah.
So, and this is just a question I have, because I think these people are healed to their extent, right? To their fullest extent. The woman with the issue of blood, healed according to her faith, and she was healed. Doesn't say that it came back or anything like that, so we don't get it. So based on what I can tell, it's to the fullest extent.
Yeah.
The reason I think about that is because, like, how often, and this is a general question, I'm not even trying to like poke at anybody.
Yeah.
How often do we only get healed part way, or like healed somewhat, because we're like, well, I think you can heal this much, or I think you can do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
I haven't really seen you do the rest of the way, but I know that you can do at least this.
Yeah.
And so because we're working off of, at least you can at least do this, that we only get that.
Or even not even being healed at all.
Yeah.
By just our lack of faith, saying like, I read about it, but like also having the thing like, can you actually do it? And that sliver of doubt is what keeps us from receiving the blessing that God has for us. And I think it definitely is a very human struggle, because we crave being able to understand things and explain things, and we have this obsession with control. So all those things we have to surrender to God, when we want to have faith, because we can't explain, how he's doing these things, because the only explanation is that he's God. And then trying to understand it and not having a role to play in controlling the healing is definitely like a very difficult issue that we as human beings have to swallow, kind of swallowing our pride and just being like, I have no part to play in this. I can't explain it. I don't understand it, but I know it's been done because it's written in here. My faith is with you, God. Like, I know you can do it. And just submitting and humbling ourselves so that we can receive, that full blessing is definitely something that we as human beings need to work on, but just be mindful of.
Yeah, I think also, I wasn't even planning on sharing this because I think I had just forgotten about it. But you mentioning our own part to play in healing. I think I was at the same place where I wasn't sure. You were talking about a sliver of doubt, and I wasn't sure if healing was a thing. I know people talk about it, but I was like, is it really? Like, there are scientific explanations that we can use. I mean, God is great. Like any healing, I think God can heal naturally in a way that we don't understand because we don't fully understand everything.
Absolutely.
And so that my thought being that took a lot of the supernatural part out of it for me, because there's whenever we know healing is a spiritual gift.
Yeah.
Whenever I hear something in scripture that we should be able to do if we have faith, that I'm not really sure if that's the case. I'm like, okay, you know what, Lord, if you say it, it has to be true. I'm struggling to understand and believe, right, transparently.
Yeah.
Please help me understand. Let me see it or let me experience it. Something that I can speak to, oh, yes, that does happen. And healing was one of those things. Some time ago, we were at a multi-site location for the church.
Yeah.
And somebody had a seizure. And I see that going on. And I also see somebody like over them and he has his hand on them. And unless you like know that person or understand what's going on, then it just kind of looks like he's there comforting him, but he's like praying over him, actively praying over him. So I go and I'm like, well, I don't know what to do and I can't really do anything. You know, we've already taken XYZ steps. We've done what we need to do. I'm going to pray because that's really all I can do is pray for supernatural healing. Yeah. And it was one of those things where it was like heat of the moment. I didn't really have time to doubt. So I start praying and literally as soon as I like touched this guy's like leg, I felt like a chill, but also like a presence on me. And I'm not even saying this is just me. I think it was like me and this other person that was praying over this person. Yeah. But the seizure stopped like within 15 seconds. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, maybe it just stopped, but also that's a little coincidental. Yeah. And then 2 minutes later, we go to somewhere, you know, that's a little more conducive to if it happens again, which it did happen again. Yeah. And, you know, eventually the EMS showed up. But it was just so weird. Like the experience was so, like I can't explain it. Like I can't explain why it would stop and then start again almost immediately. Yeah. And in both instances, stop immediately, start immediately again. So it was just weird. Yeah. But, you know, things like that. And I provide that example to say, I'm one of those people that's skeptic. And I'm like, hey, I almost need to experience it myself for me to be able to get on the same page with you. But allowing yourself to be transparent, putting yourself in the position to say, hey, this is where I'm at. I want to believe. Help me believe. Here's what will help me believe. Yeah. God may know better than you and give you a different experience than what you're asking for. But sometimes he's also gracious to be like, hey, I know that's how I made you. I'll give you an example.
Yeah. I think also another struggle is like when we as followers of Christ, when we do pray for healing, it doesn't happen immediately. We also start to doubt. I know I struggled with that because I prayed, you know, like, help me overcome this. And like I prayed for healing and supernatural healing over my body, and it didn't happen instantly. And I definitely struggled with like, okay, was this like, I started doubting myself. Like, is my faith genuine? Do I have genuine faith? And then God kind of put it on my heart to be like, I'm going to heal you on my time, not yours. And he was like, you're going through this for a purpose and for a reason. And the more I kind of sat back and reflected, had I been healed the first time I prayed, you know, I wouldn't have, first off, a story to be able to contribute to this podcast, which I don't think is a coincidence at all. That I went through an illness the week before I'm talking about physical ailments, about spiritual warfare. So I definitely don't think that's a coincidence. And I definitely wouldn't have learned a lot of the lessons that I learned through going through that week of illness and just having time to just reflect, get in my word, pray, think, a lot of the realizations I wouldn't have come to had I been healed, because I would have been running around, going to the gym, doing all types of stuff. So I definitely do think he will heal us, and he will heal, the parts of us that need to be healed according to his time and according to his plan, because ultimately his ways, his plans for us are far greater than ours.
Yeah. I think, and that's a good way to like start talking about like how God uses physical ailment and what the enemy means for evil through physical ailment for good.
Yeah.
Is because sometimes I'm there myself where it's like I'm asking for this healing, but also I'm trying to be respectful to the idea that your will be done.
Yeah.
And so I don't know where to fall as far as should I be praying without a doubt that it's going to happen, or should I be praying and also being like, but your will be done? Like, where's the balance? I think I do struggle with that, because for me, in my mind, I don't see how I can pray without a shadow of a doubt that it'll happen, that the healing will take place, and also say, but your will be done. Because then in my mind, it's starting to be this thing of like, one or the other. I don't know if I'm explaining this well, but also what I'm trying to say is I don't really understand how it works.
Yeah, I mean,
I think that kind of speaks to what makes it loving for him, is that if it's instant healing, there's a reason for it, right? Either you struggled long enough for it, it's made you desperate, and this is what it's going to take for you to believe, or for whatever reason, God needs it to continue. Maybe you haven't gotten to the point where you're ready to give your life over or to believe. Maybe he's trying to teach you, train you up, help you endure more. Maybe he's trying to slow you down because you're doing too much. And it's like,
very true.
I think, what's interesting too, now that I say that, is I think it is built into the human body of like, if you've got too much going on, and I've noticed this for me, if you've got too much going on and you're overtaxing your body will be like, actually, you know what? I'm shutting down. Like, I'm not dealing with this. And it'll almost be like I'll get sick, but not with anything specific. It's just like,
just a common cold.
You're sick.
Yeah.
So it's almost like God built that in, of like, if you're doing too much, I'm putting a stopgap in, you're going to have to slow down.
I wouldn't put it past him at all.
Yeah.
Definitely do think going through seasons of suffering, through illness, or whether it be short-term disability, I definitely do think it also tests the genuineness of our faith as followers of Christ. And to a degree, it definitely pushes us to be more dependent on God, especially when, say, we pray and the first time we aren't healed instantly. It's like, okay, well, is he going to pray to me again? Is he going to be more dependent on me, or is he just going to give up because I didn't give it to him the first time? And I think a lot of times he does put us through the ringer so we can truly test the genuineness of our faith and the level of dependency we really have, and belief that we truly have in him to provide for us and to be there for us, even if it requires us to pray, for weeks, days, and just consistently. I think that can also be a test from God.
I mean, based on what you said, I'm thinking about, right, the centurion, the woman with the issue of blood. Jesus could have gone to that man's house, and we see a lot of instances where Jesus just so happens to be in the right place at the right time to heal these people. That's not the case for the centurion. Like, the man had to go to him and then say, you don't even have to come to my house, right? So in that sense, Jesus isn't going to the centurion. He's having the centurion come to him. In the same way, the woman with the issue of blood, she could have, needed to touch Jesus, which, thinking on it now, and I don't want to sidetrack super hard, but what I was thinking about, and someone mentioned the other day, was that touching somebody when you have that issue of blood makes them unclean, makes somebody else unclean. And so I think what Jesus also respected and had a heart for was that she considered Jesus, that she wouldn't make him unclean by touching him so that she could be healed. In a way, it was self-sacrifice of, we don't know what's going through her mind exactly. What she does tell us is, I just need to touch his robe. And she had enough faith that if she touched his robe, she'd be healed.
Yeah.
But she cared about Jesus enough to not touch him and make him unclean by their culture. And I think because, in a way, Jesus also saw that he was drawn to her. More so, right, she did have the type of faith where it was like, I don't have to touch him. I only have to touch his robe. If that'll be enough for me to be healed. And that's the case, but she just still had to go to Jesus for that to happen.
Yeah. Obviously, they walked alongside Jesus. So going to him was, a more tangible experience. But I think, especially during prayer, during, one-on-one time in the Bible, we need to be seeking out God as much as we possibly can, especially if we are, going through a circumstance and we are being tested. I think being in the presence of God is the most important thing to do, even if it requires us to do it, for weeks. And we should be wanting to spend time with God out of love for him. And in the same way that they, sought out God for help and peace, we need to be seeking out God every day because, we're messed up people, whether it's a physical ailment or it's, an emotional one, a spiritual one, a mental one. We need to be relying on God completely, going to him. And I think if we could, as children of God and just as human beings, if we can have the willingness to be humble and just go to him for whatever need it is, that will help us a lot. Not only in our faith, but in stewarding our lives in the right direction.
So then with kind of visiting physical ailment, a challenge I would have, and I feel like this can apply to a lot of people, but I'll give some alternatives.
Yeah.
Is stop drinking caffeine for like a week. If you want to, right? And I was thinking about physical ailment. I was like, how do you challenge for someone with physical ailment? Like, I can't just tell someone go get sick or go get disabled.
Go hurt yourself.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna say that.
Yeah.
Because I've fasted caffeine before. Fast caffeine for a week. I promise you, it'll test how willing you are to suffer physically.
Yeah.
If you don't drink caffeine, don't eat carbs for a week. See how that goes.
Yeah.
If you can't do both of those for like budget reasons or whatever the case may be, if neither of those are applicable, just fast. Just fast for 3 days, a week, whatever puts you in the position to test your mettle against physical ailment.
That's a good one. My challenge, whether you're a non-believer, believer, or just some random person watching this, my challenge would be if there's an area in your life, physical or not, that you're struggling with, give God a chance and go out of your way to seek him and put your faith in him.
Thank you for joining me on this podcast on physical ailment. It's another one.
Thank you for having me.
I think we have a couple more, and then we're on to the armor of God.
Armor of God. Oh, that'd be
as a way that kind of God's, what's it called? Counteroffensive. God's counteroffensive.
Yeah.
So I am excited for that one because I think that'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that'll be a great one.
But thank you again for joining, for having a location to shoot on.
Pleasure. Absolutely.
And we'll see you guys next time.